Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Aleph Tech podcast, where we speak with founders, operators, and industry experts in the intersection of logistics, technology, and operational transformation about what is changing right now and what actually works in practice. Today, I'm joined by Gary Winter, an independent last mile logistic consultant and advisor with deep experience in mail, parcel, e-commerce delivery, PUDO networks, and parcel locker transformation. Thank you very much, Gary, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Ira. It's very nice to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's really great to have you here because the out-of-home delivery is changing very quickly. Lockers and PUDO points, they are no longer like additional alternative options to home delivery, but they are becoming core part of how carriers, retailers, marketplaces, and others actually think about the capacity, the cost, the convenience, and the customer experience. So from outside, I can say that locker networks, they still look very simple, right? You can install the hardware part, you can connect the carrier and give customers alternative delivery option. But in reality, the hardware part often starts with when the rollout is already there. So after the rollout, managing utilization, access, integration, returns, maintenance, customer experience, and all the economics behind it. So today, I would like to explore this central question with you. As the local network starts to scale, where does the real value lives? And it's going to be basically the topic of our today's podcast. And as always, the goal is to keep it very practical. So Gary, let's start here. Do you think parcel locker hardware is becoming less of a differentiator while the real competitive edge is moving into the software layer or not?
That's a very interesting question. I think a very long time ago, somebody said to me, you could tell when an industry was mature because all of the hardware looks like your fridge freezer. Now, it's difficult because a locker started off looking like a fridge freezer. So there hasn't been a huge amount of change. I think the last year or so has seen some differentiation. We've seen the starting with drop boxes, some inside the locker mechanism, some standalone. We've seen more lockers having printers. We're seeing having better displays, bigger color screens, and so on. But the core functionality of the locker is broadly the same. There are some variations, as I've just described, but they're broadly the same. So I think the software is starting to become the battleground of where things are really changing. And obviously, as we know, there are several different layers to the software, which we will explore in our conversation, I think.
Yeah, hardware, it's more like for reliability, durability, it definitely matters for that part. And for customer experience, the maintenance cost. But when the market reaches a certain level, it feels like things are changing, right? And
yeah, I think the challenge here is that sometimes we get locker manufacturers get very hung up on how good their locks are and and how good their mechanism is. But in reality, it's more important things like, will they rust? Will they survive 10 years in British weather or Scandinavian weather, Baltic weather? How will they survive outside? So sometimes those things are proved over the longer term. But the drive to go to cheaper and cheaper hardware, I think, is probably a mistake.
Yeah, it's actually what we see in the market now. Things are changing and improving bit by bit, but still it's more about the cost now. People start value less and less about the hardware side, about what still is used and how it will be, as you said, in 10 years, how it will be used in 10 years, what will it look like. It
Yes.
reminds me of many like logistics assets. The physical infrastructure is essential, but the next part, the software, the control layer determines the utilization.
Yeah, and I think there are three elements to the software if we get into it. So you've got kind of what we see as consumers. What is the experience like on the screen? What happens when I get to the locker? How easy is it to use? How many keys do I have to press to drop my parcel off or pick my parcel up? And I kind of think about that like ATM machines, like cash machines. Cash machines are part of everyday infrastructure. They've been around since I think the 1960s. And now I think most people could go to any cash machine anywhere in the world, even if they don't really speak the language, and make it work. They could get their money out of the machine. So they've become extremely commoditized, which is part of maturity and part of becoming infrastructure. So I think eventually, when the software is very mature and the experience is really polished, Most
Mm-hmm.
parcel lockers will feel the same, one compared to another. However, the back office is where it really matters for the carrier because they want data, they want control, they want to understand what's happening with capacity, with reliability, with uptime. And that back office is going to be, well, it's not going to be, it is super important. This is what you said right at the beginning about once you've got your network established, what's the next most important thing? It's managing it, optimizing it, getting the data, getting MI and BI and reporting to make sure everything's working correctly. And then,
Yeah,
of course, there's this control layer in the middle that joins all the pieces together.
yeah, leveraging what you actually built, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
That's,
these are big investments. You know,
yeah.
we see figures of 2,000 lockers, 5,000 lockers, and you forget to multiply that by how much each locker costs. And these are multi-million euro, tens of millions of euros investment that somebody's making somewhere. And that's all right. You've got 10 years to depreciate it, assuming your locker doesn't go rusty or malfunction. But you've still got a lot of money invested to recover. So therefore, utilization and management is key.
Yeah, absolutely. But still, we see many companies seem to be built hardware first. It's still what's happening in the market at the moment. Why do you think that happens? Why, when so much on the long-term complexity sits in integration, data utilization, daily operations, it's still hardware first. How would you explain this? What do you think about this part?
Well, I think it's kind of how companies evolve, right? So when you go to Parcel and Post Expo a couple of years ago, there were 49 locker companies exhibiting in the hall. 49.
What? Yeah.
And most of them, their core capability was being able to bend a piece of metal.
Mhm.
Now, they might have been making car parts, they might have been making microwave ovens, they might have been making any kind of metal components. Even I'm looking at the metal in the windows here. That's maybe where they came from, and they're looking at the market and saying, hey, look, we can bend metal, we can do powder coating, we can make a locker, we can get hinges, we can buy locks. We're a locker company. So the barriers to entry from that point of view are fairly low. But what I can tell you now are for certain, and I'm willing to take any kind of bet you want, if we go to Parcel and Post Expo in 5 years' time, or 10 years' time, probably 5 years' time, most of those 49 companies won't be there. They will have gone by the wayside. They will not have been able to make the investment in order to win and keep these big organizations as customers.
Mhm.
Maybe they won a small order from their local post or a carrier in their home country, but the ability to break out of that and become a significant player is much more down to software than it is to the hardware. And now, cost is important as well, of course, but software is where it's won.
Yeah, we see that too. Like companies currently building, I should say, in phases. So they are solving one part first, it's a deployment, and then they just move to the next part. How do we actually run this network efficiently? What control, what software do we need, and how we can scale that part? Because hardware, it's definitely more visible part, and it's easier to just put new lockers in a new location so people can see that company is growing. But what happens on the back office? That's
Well,
completely
exactly.
different.
So it's and the other thing that's really visible is what the user experience is like on the screen, as we said earlier. So you can get a really cool, Android-based control system and a cheap touch screen, and you can make it look really cool. And if you're only working with one back office and one hardware, your own hardware, that integration middle layer doesn't seem important at the time. But the two things that become really important is the back office is the slowest thing to mature, because as you're getting experience and as you roll out more lockers and then you build in more functionality, that becomes more and more complex. And it's
Yes.
very difficult at the beginning to visualize every single bit of functionality you're going to need at the end. So it will mature over time. So I've worked in organizations, my last organization, Quadient, I've been building their back office for 14 years. So it's really strong. They have a huge number of scenarios that they've come across over that time, and the back office has matured to be extremely capable, but also quite complex. And in a younger organization, you won't have experienced all of that requirement, and you'll be building it over time. So you won't have the same depth of capability.
Yeah, it's actually a very good point too. It a lot depends, a lot of moving parts first of all, and a lot depends on the pace of the organization, and also the initial layer that they put in place.
Well, you work for a software company, you know how important requirement capture is at the beginning. You sit down with a client, you say, what do you want it to do? And then maybe you're in a workshop for some days or maybe some weeks, and you try to think of everything. But you know that the moment you close your laptop and leave that meeting room, someone's going to say, oh, but what about this?
Yeah,
And that,
that
oh, but what
happens.
about, I'm sure it happens, right? And it happens probably every day or every week for the entire time you have that client. And the other big thing that's changing is people are looking to separate the hardware from the software. They want to take control of their own destiny with the software. And I'm seeing more and more carriers are trying to do that. They want control of it, they want to own it, and they want to be able to choose which hardware they buy. So they don't want to be tied to one hardware, one middle layer, one back office, all from one software, one supplier. They want that independence to be able to split that experience up for a number of reasons.
That's actually a very good point that you just mentioned. Very good, I should say, topic that you raised about the open network. So market moves more toward multi-carrier access, shared infrastructure, and all the things that have like integrations, shared delivery models. Does the traditional bundled hardware and software model still hold up to that? What do you think? Because currently we see more like closed infrastructures, closed models, and some of them are just starting to open more and more.
I think it starts right at the initial architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So when you design your back office, when you design your locker operating system, if from day one you said, I imagine in one time or other, 6 carriers will be using this locker simultaneously, then you make an architecture decision right at the beginning, and every decision you make after that supports that initial direction. I think what's more difficult is if you've always imagined a world where I make one locker and I sell it to one customer, a post or a carrier, and they use it for their private network, and somebody comes along afterwards and says, well, actually, we want to bring in 2 other carrier partners. How do we do it? That becomes incredibly complex. It's like buying a car and 6 months later deciding you actually wanted a van.
Yeah.
You might think you might be able to get that angle grinder out and turn it into a van. You're going to end up with a horrible mess it's no longer a good car, and it's definitely not a good van. Whereas if you design a van from the beginning, you will build a van, and even if you only use it for driving as a passenger at the beginning, you know that one day you have all the space in the back for everything to carry. And I think I'm not sure that was a good analogy or not. I kind of like it, but you need this initial architecture as a stable structure that you can then build out the functionality and capability from.
Yeah, the more participants you add, the more expensive the custom integration become. And at some point, those like closed ecosystems or focused on only one part, they can slow the growth.
Yeah, but I'm seeing it the other way around. I'm seeing organizations build their own, like carriers, build their own integration layer. So I can think of 2 immediately. One, to build a set of 31 APIs, and they said, okay, if you want us to use your network, here are our APIs, you integrate into our APIs. In another organization going even further, they're building their own middle layer with their infrastructure sat on one side, all of the shops and PUDO networks and locker networks on the other side, and saying, right, here's our specification. If you can build to our specification, we'll work with you. If you can't, then we won't. So, which is very smart, but it's pushing the burden and the cost back to the carrier or the post, or whoever has the lockers, and then they're going to push that back to their locker company. And if their locker company hasn't thought about that kind of infrastructure in the beginning, you have this architecture issue.
Yeah, that's just a lot to think about upfront, I should say, but it's very valuable when you start to grow. Gary, also, we just shortly talked about how it was in the past, how it is at the moment, and looking ahead, where do you think the value will set in the locker steel network, in the physical locker network, or the software layer managing the access, capacity, integrations?
I think it's always going to be in the software layer. That's where the value is going to sit. But I think what's going to change is people's willingness to pay, or how they pay for it. The carriers and posts are going to want more ownership. So I think the idea of this taking a bundle, taking the hardware, taking the middle layer, taking the back office, and then paying a license fee per locker, that might be okay when you've got 1,000 lockers or 500 lockers. And you might think, well, okay, it's $10 a month, and it's 120 a year times 1,000, 120,000 a year. That seems okay. But what about when you've got 10,000 lockers or 20,000 lockers? And the same software last year was costing you 120,000. This year it's costing you 2.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to start to question that model and say, why am I paying 20 times the amount where what I'm using is more or less the same? All right, there you've got to pay AWS or whoever's going to do the processing in the cloud and etc. And I think that's going to be the driver of people developing their own solution or buying a solution outright, or I guess for LF Tech, which will be good news, is paying an organization to develop something on their behalf. They're going to want control. They're going to want ownership. They're going to want to control the cost. And I think the cost has got the danger of spiraling when these populations, these networks of lockers become very large.
Yeah, actually, that value will definitely be increasingly will sit in the control layer. Like it's all about who decides who gets the access, how capacity is monetized, and how utilization is balanced.
Yeah, and if I'm buying, maybe I bought my first batch of lockers from a European company, and now I'm thinking to myself, well, actually, these are a commodity. I can go to the factory in China directly and buy them myself. But maybe I don't want the software that comes with that locker. I want my own software. So the ability to this disintermediation between the hardware manufacturer and the software provider is becoming an issue. It's happening now, but that will be the future state, I believe.
Okay, that's actually a very interesting point. And locker may become physical locker. It may become like an entry ticket, but the operating system, it's what will make the real difference. And either having that outsourced, buying the ready-made solution, or having that developed in-house, it's going to be very interesting to actually see in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I love all my analogies are to do with cars. Okay, so I'll give you another car analogy.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much money you spend on your car. Most people, when they get in, they plug in their phone and they use Google Maps or they use Apple Maps on the screen. So the car manufacturer could spend thousands, millions developing a fantastic navigation system. And most people completely ignore it and plug their telephone in and use Waze or Google Maps or Apple Maps, whichever, name your map application of choice. Why can't lockers be like that? Why develop all of that bespoke software yourself when someone's going to come along and say, okay, that's great, delete it, I'm using my own. So if I could get my car cheaper without the software installed and just plug in my phone and control my car, how attractive is that? So it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's much better. That even sounds much better, actually.
Yeah.
And then talking about already the using and feeling that, having that experience in real life. Like
have you ever hired a car and tried to use the navigation system that comes in the car? When it's not familiar to you. Maybe you drive a German car and when you're on holiday, you rent a Japanese car. I know you don't rent a car on holiday here; you just walk everywhere. But you hire this Japanese car and you've got no clue how it works. Isn't it great that you can just plug in your phone and off you go, and everything suddenly becomes familiar and easy to use? And I think this is our destiny.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I really like your analogies with cars. That's very close to me as well.
Everybody understands them.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody is a driver, I believe. And speaking about the familiarity and the software part, this is going to be my favorite, I should say, part. It's about AI, because AI is a big part of what we do at LF Tech, and we see the value of the automation of the actually improving the operational efficiency using AI a lot at the moment. There are lots of new AI-driven technologies. There are lots of new AI-native software development practices. And what is really interesting for me to hear from your expert point of view, where do you see the real first case, like a practical use case for AI in the local networks? Is it like demand forecasting, capacity prediction, maintenance, routing decisions, or maybe something totally else?
So I'm of an older generation era. So I've lived through lots of these eras where there's a buzzword around. It was going to be the Internet of Things. It was going to be the fourth internet. It was going to be these things come and go. I don't think AI is going to go, but I think a lot of the time everybody has to have an AI strategy. And my view is sometimes it's a solution out looking for a problem. It's not a problem where AI has been brought in as the solution. People have realized that their CEO has said, what's our AI strategy? We must have an AI strategy. Everyone's gone, holy crap, what do? We need to go and get an AI strategy. Let's go and find something where you can use AI for. And I think we've come through that era. And I think now people are actually understanding what the capability is. And now there are problems where maybe when you go out and look for the solution, it will come back and the solution will be based in AI. Some of the things you listed out there, I don't think are true AI. They're machine learning.
Yes.
Had route optimization. We've always had some of this stuff. You know, all of the things you've mentioned already exist in one way or another. And what we're doing is using much greater computing power to do it much more creatively and much more efficiently. Where I think a lot of this will come in, I think away from lockers and everything else, where carriers are going to use it is for customer service. If you answer the phone and help people with the tracking of their parcel, your time in employment is limited. You need to retrain. You need to retrain now, because you're going to be replaced by by an automated system that's going to understand every voice in the world, access all the tracking information that a human being could, and give exactly the same answer. If it hasn't already happened to you, it's going to happen to you. It happened to UK-based call centers when they moved to India and to Eastern Europe, and now those call centers are going to be put out of work. So I think that's very sad for the people involved. I'm not gloating about this, but it's the reality. But one of the things I did see on the locker side that was really cool is how it deals with images. Mm-hmm. So there are some people that will try to commit fraud at the locker, and some people that do graffiti and vandalism and so on. With CCTV and AI, you can train it to detect these behaviors, and you can intervene. You can stop the locker, or you can call the police, or you can do all kinds of things when you detect bad behavior at the locker. And that is the sort of thing that a CCTV camera can't do on its own, because it just records images. But as soon as you put the AI engine at the back, and you can't really pay a person to sit looking at a camera on 5,000 lockers simultaneously. Hey, the guy on locker 456, he looks like he's going to kick the door. I've seen him pull his foot back, or he's got a can of paint, and I can see. You're not going to be able to do that for 5,000, 10,000 lockers, but AI can. Mm-hmm. It can monitor these streams simultaneously and check the video in real time for any kind of incident. And I think that's really cool. And I've seen some preliminary stuff around that, but I think in the future, that's a solution I would want to see.
That's actually very interesting, because I haven't seen anything like that before. So it sounds like some use case which many companies definitely can use, because the infrastructure, again, the hardware part is still very important. But it's interesting how it can be empowered by the use of software and actually AI. But I also think that AI depends a lot on the basics. If the status data is delayed, or some information is not ready yet, or for example, the capacity data is wrong, or integrations are fragmented, then AI can just amplify that noise rather than solve the problems. So it's also very important to have the basics also.
Well, there's a very old IBM adage from before you were born, which is garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
If you put bad data in, you get bad data out. And I've tried to ask ChatGPT questions, and sometimes you have to be very, very careful how you ask the question, because you don't always know. It can't fill in the blanks and give you an intelligent answer back yet. I was building a new front wall in my house, and I asked it how many bricks I would need, and I did an estimate myself, and I thought I'll ask ChatGPT. The ChatGPT estimate was 250 bricks higher, so that was going to be 500 pounds more value in bricks. And I thought, that's strange. So I said, what thickness cement have you assumed between the bricks? And it said, oh, I forgot to include the thickness of the cement. You need 200 less bricks, because that space was made up by the cement. So if you don't ask a fully encompassing question, you won't get the answer you're expecting. My daughter's boyfriend is a bricklayer. So I asked him how many bricks, and he immediately calculated it, because he knows you use cement with bricks. But unless you tell AI you need cement between the bricks, it doesn't know. So this is a very inherent danger. So that's why I'd never heard this expression before. That's why they have these prompt engineers. Yeah. Now, I just thought that was somebody that came to your house to fix the heating on time. But it's not. It's somebody that creates these correct questions which is a whole new skill and something that just didn't exist 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, you have to have that context in place. You have to standard the data, connect the systems, and have that visibility and ownership in place to actually grow AI, ML, and other solutions which will help you to empower the software layer.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, I should say this was really exciting conversation. Thank you very much. And what I take from this discussion is that, well, parcel lockers, they are no longer just a hardware rollout. We can't say anymore that
They're
they
a
are.
must-have. They are a must-have for every carrier and post worldwide. I mean, when we get to the US, who knows? But in Europe, they're a must-have.
Yeah. And they're becoming more like network, operational network. The real challenge is how intelligently those networks are managed once they start to scale, and what is going to what a company is going to do about the competitiveness and about that part also. And I think we also touched very important point about that winners may not be simply the companies who have the most lockers, but those who have those lockers more open, more efficient, and easier for users, carriers, and the retailers. Thank you
Absolutely.
very much,
Agree.
Gary, for joining today. And I also want to thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with others, someone working in parcel delivery, out of home networks, or last mile operations.